Story 1. My mom and sister lived together still. They couldn't afford rent or their car between the two of them. They nearly had the car repossessed and were closing in on eviction until my grandmother loaned them enough money to keep the car and stay in their apartment. She explicitly said, "Pay me back when you're more stable." For months later, my sister gets her tax refund for approximately $4,500. She had a kid and isn't with the father, and instead of making any effort to pay my grandmother back, pay off the car, or have any sort of emergency fund, the two of them buy an expensive purebred puppy, Airedale Terrier. They dropped over $2,000 for the dog and then spent another $500 on a crate, toys, leashes, and dog food. Less than 6 months later, they lost the car and were evicted. They moved in with my aunt, and her husband hated the dog, so it was taken to the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. It wasn't even a year old. My grandmother didn't see a cent of money returned before she died. So that's it. People bad with money buy things they can't afford instead of stabilizing what they already have. Story 2. I work on cars for a living, and the vast majority of the BMWs that come into my shop have slick tires and lights blinking on their dash. So many of these people can barely afford a luxury car, let alone the maintenance required to keep them nice and running. Story 3. I had a buddy in college who would go through a cycle of bragging about how much money he had, spend it all on dumb stuff, then brag about how poor he was, all while claiming he was a rich kid. The best part was when he was talking about having some money to this girl he liked. It turns out that girl came from an actually wealthy family. She said, "It's only $5,000. Why do you keep mentioning it? Is that a lot to you?" That event quieted him down for a bit. Laugh out loud. Story 4. Depends on what you call bad. My sister has been a saver and penny pincher since childhood, which was a bit traumatic, admittedly. She is now nearing retirement and everything she and her husband have is paid off. She isn't rich, but will have the comfortable retirement she has earned and deserves. She hates going into debt, and her cards are paid down monthly. Sounds great, right? It would be if she wasn't so completely obsessed and angered by people who don't do or think as she does, including her husband. For instance, her house and cars are modest to decent, while her friends are all buying nicer things, vacation homes, travel, and other luxury items. Most, if not all, of these things are paid for with credit, and it just drives her crazy. She is so jealous of what they have, yet so angry at how they got it. On the occasion that she and her husband join friends for a cruise or resort stay, her main concern is cost, which ruins a huge part of the trip for her every time, and monitoring how others are wasting their money. Never to their faces, this is just what she says to me after. Her husband used to be a pretty fun guy about 30 years ago when they met, but has become bitter and grumpy after decades of having to fight for things she deems unnecessary, like tickets to his favorite concerts or pricey sports and music memorabilia, which he's always been into. It has resulted in dishonesty between the two, which is not the kind of guy he really is, and she has grown disgusted by his need for childish hobbies and entertainment. My sister has always been a bit of a fun hater, but it's gotten to the point where it makes her, and sometimes the people around her, miserable. She lives and works in a small town and pays attention to who is getting free lunch, who is paying with food stamps at checkout, who is driving a car they can't afford, etc. She has called me and listed the items she's seen a family buying with food stamps. Can't fathom them buying Doritos and Kool-Aid. There is more than one way to be bad with money. Story 5. Never reading the financial terms and conditions, but always signing up for new financial obligations. Story 6. Looking at the payment amount and not the purchase price. A coworker asked one time, "This phone is $1,300, but I can get it for just $60 per month for 2 years. Seems like a good deal to me. $60 per month isn't that much. Should I do it?" I asked him, "Does your phone work?" "Yes." "Okay. If someone dropped $1,300 in your lap right now, is this what you would spend it on?" "No." "Then it's not a good use of your money." He showed up to work the next week with the brand new phone. Another coworker wanted a Honda Ridgeline. He went to a car broker and said he wanted this truck, X years, Y miles, and his payment could only be $500 per month. He was amazed the guy got him the truck for that payment. He had no idea what his final purchase price was, what his loan term was, or what his interest rate was. All he knew was that he could afford the payment. Story 7. As someone who was formerly bad with money, being in a cycle of debt and using apps to borrow money to pay towards your credit cards and to have money for food was my reality. Thankfully, I'm no longer trapped in this cycle, and I never want to be in that cycle again. Story 8. Constantly ordering food for delivery despite living within close proximity of a grocery store, especially when you are not financially secure enough to be doing that in the first place. My order from McDonald's, which is like $12, ends up being around $30 through DoorDash. If you are that desperate for some McDonald's, just walk, my friend. Story 9. My family is in $20,000 of debt, but my mother and her brother just went on their 13th trip to Spain in the last 12 months. Because I can afford it, she snapped at 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning. As I caught her sneaking out for another one, she thinks that I'll get a well-paying job to bail her out, which is not happening because if I gave her the money for the debt, she'd probably spend it all from the moment she leaves the house and on the way to the bank. She works a minimum wage, 12-hour-a-week job, high school dropout, and has my father deported after an argument when I was young, bragging about it to this day. My older sister, a full-time college student, has a part-time job at the same place she works at and earns almost twice as much, minus the overtime. Story 10. Constantly talking about the stock market or a new investment without understanding the basic principles of investing. Story 11. My ex-wife. Before divorce, we filed for bankruptcy. 80% of the debt was in her name. We divorced over other reasons, but money was part of it. I left her the house, but she could not keep up with the bills. Instead of selling, it had to be foreclosed on. She met a guy and they moved into a rented house. He maintained the bills and wasn't a bad guy. I even met him a few times. They broke up, and again she was evicted for not paying rent and bills. Now, she lives with her sister and the kids. I was paying child support for them, but now they live with me. 3 years living with her sister, and she still can't afford to move out. Story 12. People who place pictures of money around their house say that money will manifest in their lives. I met a whole group of these people through my ex-wife once, and not a single one of them has a consistent or successful work history. Story 13. My girlfriend and I keep our finances separate. Why? She once did some extra work somewhere for a day only, and this was paid well. 2 weeks later, she came up to me asking for some money. Me, why? Her, because I still haven't got my money for this work I had done recently. Me, so? This was a one-time thing? It should have given you extra money, but now you're out of money. Her, yes, I already bought some things I wanted. Me, even if they didn't pay you already, what about the money you usually earn? Turns out she literally spends everything she gets. Now, she got some extra money and already spent it on even more useless stuff. That's why we keep finances separated. I would be bankrupt if she had access to my account. Story 14, talking about payday. If the day that 2 weeks of wages hits your bank account changes your spending habits, you're in trouble. Story 15, my wife has 2 friends that are the worst people I've ever met when it comes to handling money. Friend 1. They have a kid and are convinced that they can make it on one income because my parents could do it. The wife has a shopping addiction and is constantly buying expensive clothes for her baby and things for the house. The husband works stocking shelves and drives for Uber sometimes. They had a $70,000 settlement that they wasted in about a year. They got evicted from their apartment for not paying and had their Cadillac, which they are paying $750 a month for, repossessed twice. They are now moving into a more expensive house to rent. According to my rough estimate, their house and car expenses exceed the retail salary the sole income is making. Friend 2 also has a child and has had their more reasonable, in fairness, car repossessed many times. They moved out of state for the husband's job, which was paying well, but he lost the job for not showing up. They moved back and started begging for money constantly, asking their parents, friends, and even me, not really a friend, but I guess she got my Venmo to request money, and got evicted because they haven't paid rent in months. They are not looking for jobs, nor are they looking for apartments. They will probably soon be homeless with their kid. It is a shame because the job they moved out of state for can pay up to $150,000, but instead, He is unemployed and she is working at a daycare part-time. Nice people, all of them, and I understand times are hard because we're still young and just moved out, but I've never met 4 people so terrible at handling money. Story 16. Living paycheck to paycheck and eating or ordering out. If you barely have enough money at the end of the month, you shouldn't be doing that. It's difficult, and I believe wages need to go up, but it is what it is. Story 17. Hey, can I borrow $50? I am not going to be able to make my insurance payment tomorrow unless I can come up with it somehow. Story 18. During a vacation in Seattle, Darkside Phil spent as much money as possible, yet complained about being poor afterwards. Story 19. I live in an unsatisfactory place but have a $700 a month car payment. I found a strong correlation between habitually late individuals and poor money management as well. Story 20. One unique case was a guy I knew in college who seemed very mentally unstable. He would spend very recklessly on little things, such as claw machines, among other things. We would tell him to slow down, and he always replied, "It's okay, my parents are rich." However, from what I know, his parents weren't wealthy. Story 21. I have a friend who makes almost twice what I do. She's probably close to 6 figures while working from home, living freely in her parents' home. She doesn't drive, refuses to take local transit, opting only for the more expensive regional train for special occasions, maybe monthly, and doesn't use Uber much. She doesn't come across as particularly irresponsible, but I have always wondered where all her money goes since she'll regularly say she's tight on cash. Story 22. My friend bought 2 rent-to-own couches. She makes over $90,000. I'm not sure how much her husband currently makes, but it's over $50,000. That's what he made before a promotion. Why buy a couch like this? Their dogs tore it up after only having it for 1 month, but they owe 2 more years on the couches. The couches were less than $2,000, and they're fabric, not leather. She also bought a boat but didn't buy a trailer or a vehicle that can tow the boat. So her brother took the boat to use it, and she hasn't seen it since 3 years ago. Story 23. Visit the Camaro or Charger subreddit and look at all the people getting their $80,000 cars stolen because they can't afford to keep them in a garage. Story 24. Nice cars outside rundown homes. If you have a $50,000 vehicle and a tarp on your roof, you most likely have your priorities in the wrong order. When I worked in finance at a dealership, it was insane the number of people coming in looking for higher trim level vehicles for $50,000 or more on $50,000 household incomes. Story 25. My neighbor, who is a renter, just bought a Cybertruck to park alongside his Porsche. And yesterday, the mailman mistakenly gave us some of his mail, and it included a postcard from the power company saying he owes more than $400 and they are about to shut off his power. So all of that. Story 26. When you receive a relatively large insurance settlement after becoming permanently disabled, in a way that prevents you from working and necessitates living off that money for an unknown amount of time, then immediately spending several $1,000s on redoing the entire living room in camouflage is questionable. Also, knowing you will be in a wheelchair for about 3 to 4 months and spending another several $1,000s out of that limited sum to turn the already good-sized back porch into a giant deck so you can roll around in bigger laps is similarly questionable. Story 27. Renting something to own it from Rent-A-Center because you couldn't afford to buy it outright is a common situation. My brother-in-law and sister-in-law do this all the time, and their justification is asinine. Well, I justify it because I can't afford to pay the $500 right now, but I can afford to pay $100 per month over the course of 7 months, or some reasoning like that. Basically, they can't afford the lump sum price now, but they can afford to make monthly payments that add up to way more than the actual price of the item. Story 28. My roommate, whom I jokingly refer to as the downstairs goblin, refuses to go to a store or cook. Instead, he uses DoorDash 3 times a day and then asks for help with rent. Story 29. I kept my savings in an account earning 0.25% interest compounded quarterly for many years before I finally moved it to an account earning 5% compounded monthly. So, I guess I am pretty bad with money. Correction. The interest actually compounds daily and is deposited into my account monthly. Story 30. Constantly complaining about not having money but spending $20 or more per day on energy drinks, snacks, and vapes from 7-Eleven. Story 31. Buying a new car because your old one is going to be out of warranty soon and you can't afford an unexpected repair bill. Then buying the new one based on monthly payments and not the out-the-door price. And then doubling down and letting them basically steal your trade-in, which had equity. Had a friend do this. We had the same car 6 years ago. Mine is a lower trim level. My friend replaced theirs twice since I got mine because of the warranty thing each time. Mine's been paid off for years, why not just pay it off and bank the payment money for repairs? I'll never understand this.